I know I had some place to begin, but walking into this room and meeting people in the first 10 minutes I was in here, I feel compelled to start elsewhere. So I think I met 15 people in the first 3 minutes I was in here, all of whom are doing amazing things in this community, including young people who are doing amazing things to support each other in this community. And I'm about to talk about hopelessness among young people. And if there is an antidote to hopelessness among young people, it is seeing a community like this gather around and support them and create this foundation for them. So there's something about this, more of this, and you can go. Like, you can go watch TV, whatever you want to do. I'm really glad you guys are here, and I really appreciate you taking time out of a busy middle of the week to be here. I've spoken to GPS before, and I have probably said a lot of things like, really concerned with certain groups of our teens who seem to have fallen on hard times, made bad choices. We need to find ways to support these kids. In recent years, that's expanded to include all of our young people that I have some degree of concern about because of circumstances that really are of no fault of their own, just societal circumstances that have kind of swept them up. A few years ago, I think I might have been here in person. I can't remember for sure, but it was 2019. I wrote a book called Parenting the New Teen in the Age of Anxiety. And I didn't love the title, but I liked that it included a new teen because we are dealing with a new kind of teen here, and the age of anxiety because this is unfamiliar. What you're dealing with as parents, as caretakers, as teenagers is unfamiliar to all of us. We're all learning as we go. And it was late in 2019, and I was pretty sure I had a pretty good beat on the future. I knew how things were going to go well into 2020. There weren't going to be any dramatic societal changes. So this was evergreen. I was certain that I had evergreen content on my hands. Little did I know. If you have to leave now, let's say you left the iron on, and you're wondering, like, does this guy have one point that he wants me to walk out of this room with? The singular point would be the commodity that we are dealing with now with young people is hope. Our kids are losing hope, and they're losing hope fast. I see hopelessness as the primary symptom that my kids deal with. Our kids are disconnected, and they're lonely. They're in silos, and they don't see a lot of good in their future. And that is such a lethal combination that funnels down into hopelessness. So if you have nothing else that you walk out of this room with, your job is to instill hope. I'm going to mention a whole bunch of different little issues that will be familiar to you that you're probably struggling with your kids, or as some of the young people here might say they're struggling with on their own. But all of it, honestly, comes down to hope. So back in that book tour in 2019, I'm talking about the stressors that our kids are going through that I think maybe we don't know that much about as parents, as caregivers, as teachers, as other caring adults around our kids. So they included some of the usual suspects. Social media that drives the self-worth and the self-esteem of our kids and is ever morphing, right? So back in 2019, I was probably talking about Instagram and, maybe even Facebook. Now, Snapchat and, TikTok. There are new iterations all the time. And if you're a parent, you might feel like, oh, these are designed to elude me. Like, specifically, I don't know how TikTok works. I don't know how to work it. I don't know how to get through Snapchat. I don't know how to track my kid and see if they're safe online. For kids, it's a new way to connect, and it's exciting, and it's fun. So we have to keep that in mind, too. Our kids did not come up with this stuff. They were born with this stuff, right? You know what I mean? Like, I worked with a girl recently whose mom said, you've got to stop paying attention to this social media identity that you have. And the girl said, you made that social identity. Like, that was your call. Like, you've been videotaping me and posting it online since I was a little tiny kid, and now you expect me to just abandon the 10 or 15 years of accumulated data online? No chance. So what social media does for our kids is it drives their self-worth and their self-esteem, usually not in great ways. Body image issues are affecting boys and girls across the board. I don't think I've met the kid, and I know over the years, I think I've met 500 or so kids who isn't affected by that. And now they're deeply affected, and they're comparing themselves not to the kid down the hall, but to an AI image on Instagram or TikTok, something they could never, ever, ever get to, even if they were inclined to. So that's a huge problem with social media. One girl I work with, brilliant thought. She said, what social media does for me is it creates another identity I have to keep track of. So I have this identity at home with my family. I have this identity with my friends at school, with my teachers, with my boss, with my coach, with myself. And now I have my social media identity. And that used to be one thing. But now, with each social media app, I have a different identity. I have to track all of that. It's exhausting. And sometimes I lose track of, like, who am I? And maybe sometimes I don't want to know. I'd rather gather up the likes and the follows than to really know who I am and what my deal is. So social media, big problem. Big issue that we need to work with our kids. Our kids are under enormous academic pressure. I was talking earlier today about a talk I gave a couple weeks ago. And at this moment, I was interrupted by a man who said, hey, wait a minute. We had academic pressure when I was a kid. It was hard. College was hard. High school was hard. It's not that much different for my kid. And this is a common sentiment. I hear this a lot. And so the discussion that he and I had was, okay, let's go back in time. Let's say that you and I, so he and I went to what would arguably are pretty decent undergrad colleges. And I said, so if we had our transcripts, our extracurricular activities, our ACT scores, our SAT scores, and we were to submit those to the colleges we graduated from, do we get in? And we both agreed, like, we don't hit the wait list. Like, we're in the round file right away. It's that much harder. It's that much harder now to gain access to the very best schools. And there are NCAPs at Barnes & Noble guiding us toward, like, how to get your kids into the best schools, and why isn't your kid in 4 or 5 AP classes, and why isn't your kid president of a club, and why isn't your kid president of the swim team? And it raises our anxiety and it raises our kids' anxiety to the point where I am working with a 14-year-old, I think she's still 14, high school freshman. She got a C on a math quiz, and she is convinced that that's the end. I'm not going to be able to recover from this. I'm going to have to settle for something way less than what I was hoping for in my life. She thought, like, that one moment, I blew it, and she meant it. And a lot of kids feel this way. So part of our job is to soften that blow and to let our kids know, like, you're probably going to end up in the right place. Like, we have the luxury of a little time behind us, and we can look at the arc of history of lives, and by and large, things work out. When you're 14, it doesn't feel that way. It feels like this is devastating. This is awful, right? As a result of a lot of that, we're seeing this increase in drug use. The drug of choice for the day tends to change every few years. Can anyone say, is anyone willing to say out loud what they think the drug of choice for the average teenager in the western suburbs of Chicago is right now? Say it again? Pot. Yeah, it's weed. 100%, 1,000% weed, right? Yeah, and it is a confounding thing for so many adults because there are so many different delivery systems, right? So you can ransack your kid's room tonight and find, okay, I think these are gummies. This might be Zyn. This might be THC. I've read about that. I don't know what this little vaporizer thing does. I don't know if this is a flash drive. It's super confusing, right? You know, and so you don't even know what it is you don't even know what to lecture about because you're not even sure what you're looking at. We're the first generation of parents to have to learn how to be kids and what it's like to be a kid from kids. You know, it used to be like, I know what it's like to ride your bike into the part of town you're not supposed to go into, but we don't know, you know, what a vape is and exactly what it does, right? You know what I mean? When kids say cart, what are they talking about? Most of us don't know. And it's not benign. You know, weed is about 30 times more potent today than it was when I was in high school. So whereas it was truly a recreational drug then, it is distilled down to something really, really potent and powerful. Am I saying it's the root of all evil? Absolutely not, no. But is it something we need to attend to and talk to our kids to? 100%, right? And there are other risks that we probably would rather not talk about, right? Because by my estimation, every 2 to 3 months in the Chicagoland area, there is an influx of fentanyl and fentanyl poisonings, and let's face it, a few fentanyl deaths. Every few months we hear about this. And I think some people in my field might hear more about the tragedies than are published in the paper, but they happen pretty frequently. The other thing that happens with that is I've worked with dozens of teenagers who will smoke one time or take a pill, and they will have had a little bit of fentanyl poisoning such that they will come to me and say, I've been to like 9 therapists. They all tell me I'm fine. I know I'm not. I know there's something wrong with my brain. I can't think straight. I give them a little cognitive test to test that out. They can think perfectly fine. They go get MRIs. The doctor missed it. I can't believe the MRI machine missed it. They want there to be something wrong with them. And it takes about a year to get them past thinking that there's something tragically wrong with them. So fentanyl has risks beyond just lethality. And it's an important thing for us to keep in mind. And I'm not big on parental lectures, but that's one of them we're entitled to. A couple other unpleasant things I feel the need to bring up because they are frequent topics in my office. School shootings. A lot of parents think, I think my kid might be over it. We're not hearing about it quite as much this year. It's an election year. I think maybe it's getting buried underneath a lot of other headlines, but kids are concerned about this. I don't know, I think it was 2022. There was a shooting down in Uvalde, Texas. You probably remembered it was an absolute disaster in terms of response and everything else. I didn't learn about that shooting. It happened in the middle of a day, and I was at work. And I didn't learn about that shooting through a CNN alert or TV or radio or a podcast or anything. I got 3 text messages that day in the middle of sessions from kids. So I left my office to go take a quick bathroom break, and I looked at my phone, and it said, hey, just in case you have to talk about this with some of the other kids in your office, there was this big shooting down in Texas. So these kids are trying to take care of each other. But picture the scene. Here are 3 kids sitting in a classroom, in a school, letting their therapist know about a shooting in a classroom in a school. Not the greatest way to learn, right? I mean, you know, like, how high must their anxiety be in order to highlight that and make that something that they need me to know, that they want me to know? Really, really awful. The other thing we'll get out of the way is pornography. I don't think I can understate the potency of pornography in the lives of our kids, especially our boys. I don't work with or know many boys who don't watch pornography really, really regularly. I am currently working with a 13-year-old boy who thought, okay, I'll give this guy a lesson on how this works, how this evolves, especially in the life of a boy. He said, when you're 8 or 9, you stumble upon something called Pornhub. That's G-rated pornography. This is a 13-year-old talking. By the time you're my age, you're in the recesses of the dark web, and you are seeing stuff that is traumatic and horrifying for you. And we all know, because we read headlines, that kids are less connected with one another. They don't date. They're not intimate with one another. They're not drawn to that. Boys in particular, this happens all the time. And we're seeing less and less and less of that excitement and thrill of, like, you know, that adolescent juice of, like, man, should I talk to this girl? Should I talk to this guy? Should something happen here? Kids are not into that. There's this lifelessness around that entire issue. 10 years ago, if I were talking to a teenager, we're talking about a guy or a girl all the time. That's half the session, maybe more. I often have to redirect, like, yeah, you're getting D's though. We should probably get onto that, you know? But this is what we're talking about, is we're talking about, like, that attraction, because it's so internal to them. And now I feel like there's something dying off here that is really, really awful and dangerous. So we need to talk to our kids about that from uncomfortably early ages in their lives. I am seeing an uptick in suicidal thinking and completed suicides, and something I will call passive suicidality. Those of you who are in my field directly or in a tertiary way will know in a minute what I mean by that. One odd piece of good news is, over the course of the pandemic, kids are up for being in therapy. Suddenly, the taboo around mental illness seems to have diminished enormously. And so sometimes I'll work with a 16-year-old boy, and a couple of his buddies and one of his girlfriends will drop them off at therapy. They'll come in and say hi. They'll pick him up. The taboo is gone. Meanwhile, there are fewer therapy hours available for those kids. So over the course of the pandemic, a lot of my colleagues have decided, like, they want to pursue other interests. They don't much like the model of working virtually. And so we have all these kids who are ready and not enough people to serve them. So I fear that everybody in this room is probably, with at least one kid in your life, a de facto therapist, right? Who has to, like, take care of a kid in some way because there might not be a therapist available for that child. So it's a very funky place to be, because I've been at this for about 30 years, hoping, like, yeah, one day the taboo's going to drop and everything will be right with the world. That taboo drops, and all the therapists are like, yeah, we were done with that now. we were going to help out. We're going to tap out now. So that's some of the stuff that kids were dealing with 5 years ago when I wrote that book. And if you think back, do you remember dealing with any of that stuff when you were a kid? Because I don't at all, right? Because this is a new kind of teen, and this is a new age of anxiety. Things have changed. Part of the issue is that so much of the lives and experiences of our kids takes place in the margins of their lives that we are not privy to. So it takes place up in a closed door bedroom, down in the basement, outside the house, on a screen, or one of my worst fears, AirPods. And our kids are listening to music and podcasts in particular, tons of them, that go for hours on end, that are developing worldviews for our kids, which in and of itself might not be the worst thing. But if we don't know who they're listening to, what they're listening to, if we're not privy to it because we're not interested, or we assume, oh, they're probably listening to Top 40 radio or something like that, then we're missing the boat, and our voice isn't in the mix when our voice needs to be in the mix, because a lot of kids that I work with, they are developing their worldview, and it is being fed to them with podcasts that last hour after hour after hour. So imagine being propagandized while you're developing a sense of self, time and time and time again, day after day after day. It is alarming, and we need to be in the mix. In a talk I gave recently, somebody said, well, I'm glad you're not talking about my kid because this sounds terrible. And the truth of the matter is that this stuff affects all kids. So if your child is that type A kid working till 2 o'clock in the morning to make sure she gets into Yale no matter what she does, or that type B kid who's down in the basement smoking weed and playing video games, and I don't care, Mom, I'm eating Fritos. These kids are dealing with the same set of stressors in a completely different way. But it's the same set of stressors. So if we can manage these stressors, we're helping all these kids to meet somewhere in the middle and thrive a little bit. And there's some research to back this up. 50% of kids have reported being depressed and anxious within the same year. Those of you who are in my profession would probably say, it's probably a little more than 50%. But still, we're paying attention to this, right? The more alarming statistic to me is that 25% of kids, 25, a quarter of the kids, so 25% of your classroom, right, does not necessarily value their lives. So what I get is a line, something like this, fairly frequently. Yeah, I'm not going to do anything to hurt myself. I don't know if I have the wherewithal, the interest, the energy to do that. But if I got hit by a bus walking out of here, I think that'd be okay because I don't think anything remarkable is going to happen. I've been waiting for a long time for life to happen, and it doesn't seem to be happening. And so they just don't value themselves. So imagine if you feel that way, investing in yourself, picturing a bright future, that's not in the cards. That's not where you are at all. This is part of the place where hopelessness comes in. It's pretty fun so far, right, guys? I promise you it gets better. But bear with me for just a couple minutes because I'm going to talk about the pandemic just real briefly. So that was 2019. Pandemic hits, right? And I thought, oh my gosh, should I write a book about the pandemic and talk about the stressors affiliated with that? Well, within pretty quick time, the pandemic lifts, right? It takes a while. There's awful carnage in the wake of it. But there's some fallout too. Like I thought, oh, maybe as we come out of this thing, our kids are going to buoy and their self-worth and their self-esteem and the depression and anxiety, all this stuff is going to be better than it was before. Not exactly what happened. So the first thing I noticed is our kids missed a year, year and a half, 2 years of practice effect of connecting with each other, looking at each other, talking to each other, hugging each other, and flirting and gossiping and doing awful things and figuring out ways to recover from that. So I started seeing this social anxiety in kids that I had never seen before, and in huge, huge numbers. And part of it was we just haven't done this in a long time. So I've had kids who are like, some of these kids are my best friends since I was a little kid, and I don't know how to talk to them. I don't know how to start a conversation, which, if you think about it, makes perfect sense. And I've talked to some adults who feel the same way. Like, you know, I have really, really good friends. I'm not sure how to get started with them. So kids feel that because they don't have that lifetime behind them. Kids feel that acutely. So that's the first thing I noticed. One other thing I noticed is kids became so much more jaded than they had been before. The way one young guy put it, he was being funny, but he was being serious as well. He said, sometime mid-March 2020, Mom comes into my room. You know what? There's something going around, and you are going to get an extra long spring break, so good for you. Isn't this going to be great? And then it was like, it's going to be a weird summer. We're going to get some puzzles. We're going to hang out in the house a little bit more than we used to like, okay, we're going to try something called asynchronous learning. So we're going to get you a gas mask and a hazmat suit, and You're going to go to school like Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, you're going to lay in bed, turn off your camera, and pretend to go to school. And you probably all have seen your kids play this game, right? Like throughout. And a lot of kids haven't stopped playing that game. So the next thing I'm worried about is, and this is not something I thought I was going to run into in my career, but kids are inert. So many kids have not started moving since the pandemic. Kids who are active, kids who are athletes and engaged and involved in all sorts of groups and clubs and activities and plays and debate. And that turns out to be an enormous problem because anxiety just accumulates in their minds and their bodies and their spirits in a most damaging way. And I'll bet you everybody here, I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, can think of a teenager who in all likelihood is horizontal right now, on a bed, on a couch, on the floor, looking up at the, scrolling through TikTok or watching Gilmore Girls one more time or Breaking Bad, but not engaged in their lives, and that is a big concern. Our kids feel less hope than they used to. They don't have this opportunity that a lot of us had growing up to dream and to be idealistic about our lives. I was talking to my wife not long ago about this. And she said, how'd you know you wanted to do what you do? Like, so you do a weird thing. And I said, yeah, that's fair. And I told her, on a lark, when I was a kid, a buddy of mine and I went to see a movie called Ordinary People, which 80% of you probably have never heard of. But it was, there was a character in the movie who was a therapist in the suburbs of Chicago working with teenagers. And I remember just this little click in my mind like, that's a thing a guy can do. And all the 15 years later, it's way more than that, I'm actually doing that thing. And our kids don't have that idealism. They don't get the luxury of it because they just know too much about too much. And that's a problem for them. And we have to think about the model that we're setting. Because if you ask most kids about adulting and what that looks like for them, what I hear more often than not is, oh, I don't want my parents' life. I don't think my parents are happy. I hear weird things like, I don't know if my dad listens to music, or I don't know if my parents laugh or have fun. I don't think they date. I don't think they hang out together at all. And I don't think they like their jobs. And I hear them complain about their lives all the time. And I hear my teachers do the same. I hear other adults in my life do the same. So the idea of getting to that point, if this is what we're working toward, if this is what all this turmoil is about, I prefer not. I'm going to tap out. I'm going to infantilize myself, and I'll play video games, and wait for something to happen. That's what I hear more than anything else. That is a very common phrase in my office, is maybe magically something will happen, because I don't know how to make it happen. So I'm just going to sit and wait and hope that, some talent police knocks on my door and says, hey, come out here because we need you out here. But they know it's not going to happen. So the adulting does not look good to them. That is a cue for us. So thanks for coming to my TED Talk, and we'll talk to you. So that's the bad news. That's the end of the bad news. Everything else is it's up from here. I promise you. So here are some things that we can do. So right now, you have the agency to drive the narrative going forward, an awful lot of it. You are still the most influential, most important people in the lives of your kids if you are a parent. And you might not believe that, but statistically, truthfully, that is true. I am not selling you a bill of goods, I promise. So you get to write the better story, and you can start that tonight. So the first thing we'll talk about is you. You might be familiar with the Surgeon General alert, warning, I don't remember exactly what it was called, that came out about 6 weeks ago about the well-being of parents. And effectively it said a third of parents reported feeling overwhelmed, anxious, and unwell parents of teens, tweens, young adults, younger kids. And finally, the Surgeon General is noting this, right? So the first thing I'm going to ask you to do, and this I didn't think I would do because I would have been bad at this when my child was younger, but I'm going to ask you to take care of yourselves. That whole thing about like the cabin is losing air pressure, your oxygen mask goes on first. In my head, I thought, I'm definitely putting my kid's mask on first, but I don't think I would. And the reason is we need you on your game. We need you to be prepared and ready to take care of your kids at any time. So what does that look like? First of all, you need someone that you can talk to on a regular basis. And I know a lot of parents who kick that can down the road pretty readily. Like, I'll get to that. I'll get to me. Right now I'm trying to take care of my kids. But we are carrying a lot of stress and frustration and sadness and anger around. And if we have a sibling or a coworker or a parent or a friend that we can talk to about our stuff, that is a good thing. Unload with somebody that you know who can understand what you're going through, that you love and that you trust. First thing, but a huge thing, because it gets you on your game and it removes an awful lot of the clutter that we need removed. Big deal, right? Big deal. We spend our lives telling our kids, would you just put that damn thing down, right? You know, whatever the damn thing is that has a screen on it. And oftentimes we're doing it like, you know, you keep looking at that thing, you know, you're going to go blind. You're like, you know, like we are not practicing what we preach at all, right? You know, we're oftentimes, and I've seen it, where parents are lecturing their kids while they're doing the thing they're lecturing their kids about. So be prepared to take breaks from social media. A kid not that long ago told me about an app called Brick. Is anyone familiar with Brick? So Brick is an app where you effectively put in settings, and all you have access to for 22 hours a day is what you choose to. And it's usually really, really basic. I think you get 6 options. So it'd be a phone, texting, Uber. I'm going to want that. I'm going to want Uber Eats. I'm going to want Spotify, you know, like, and then you're kind of done. And that's what you have most of the day. And so if you're going to look at social media, or you're going to look at Snapchat, or you're going to play around, that's in the margins. I've worked with a few people who've downloaded this, and it has changed their lives. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But regardless, for yourselves, take breaks from this stuff, right? Don't just preach it. Don't just tell your kids to do it. But, you know, we all have the impulse, right? We all kind of know that at 9:07 tonight, we're going to get to our cars, we're going to take a deep breath, and we're probably going to be like, okay, I got to let you know, I'm coming home, I'm heading home, okay, yeah, this guy talked, I don't know if he was any good, you know, like, whatever you do, we're probably going to be on these screens, like, immediately. I'll include myself in that. Like, you know, we're not going to leave the parking lot until we look at this thing, right? So I'm going to urge you all, challenge you, get out of the parking lot and get home before you look at your screen and see how hard that is. Because that's what I'm asking kids to do a lot. Keep hope alive for yourself. I work with so many parents, and they have these dreams and these passions and these things they love and these things they used to do. And the lecture I get is, listen, I'm mid-career, and I'm taking care of kids, and we're trying to make money, and I'm super busy. I will pick up the guitar or the running shoes or the violin or the manuscript some other time. I don't have time to do that right now. But remember, adulting looks bad to our kids because we are not inspired, they are not inspired. Our model means a lot to them. So if you need one reason to get back to the thing you love, that's a great reason. It's also inspiring unto itself. It changes the vibe of your space, of your home. So we all probably have some latent passion. Get back to it. Do not wait, because a lot of people will say, listen, I got 2 kids, it's about 20 years. You know, when it's done, I'll get back to it. And I'll tell you, my kids, well beyond that, there is no end point, right? You know, parenting is a life sentence, it turns out. So that time, that moment, right? That moment that you think is going to happen where it's like, oh, finally, drop off at college. I'm going to pick up, I'm going to tune up this guitar. Doesn't happen that way. Usually it's like, oh, I got an emergency call. I got to drive back down to campus, or, you know, something else is going on, or my other kid's struggling, whatever it is. So take care of yourself and keep the idea of therapy open for you, because we need you on your game during this time. Super, super important. I'm going to ask you to attend to the vibe in your house. I want you to picture it for a second. Picture your house right now. Picture walking in the front door in an hour. And what does it feel like in there? Is it loud? Is it noisy? Is it cluttered? Is it dead quiet to the point where you're like, oh God, I gotta get out of here? Think about a space that feels like a sanctuary to you, because I want you to keep in mind, the world out there is noisy for kids. There is distraction and noise coming at them from every direction. Home needs to be a sanctuary. And the cue you can use is, if your kid comes in the door and heads right up to their room, this probably isn't a sanctuary. So you might want to make a few changes. And your cue can be you. If it feels good to you, it's probably going to feel at least better to your child. The next one's harder, because I want you to think for a second, and I want you to be really honest with yourself. I'm not going to call anybody out, but what does your kid get from you? What does that child get from you when they walk through that door? Do you light up when you see them? Do they know, hey, I've got you. You know, it's been a terrible day. I've looked at the portal. You haven't turned in 8 assignments in math. You have a D in English. I've heard from 2 other of your teachers, you know, you're in huge, huge trouble. And I know you snuck out this past weekend. On the worst day, can you really say, like, I remember how much I love this kid. And fundamentally, at the foundation, I can let him or her know we're good. We're good. We're going to change some things, but we are good. I've got you. We're solid. That means the world to kids. Kids are overt and express that to me. They will say, literally, when I bring up the light up thing, they'll say, I don't think anybody does that for me. My parents don't. My teachers don't. My friends don't. No kid in the hall does. I don't. So no. And when nobody lights up for you, when nobody shows that they are glad to see you, what kids tell me is they not only feel like a problem, they feel unnecessary as people. They feel like, I'm superfluous. I really don't need to be here, which leads to that passive suicidality and certainly drives that hopelessness that I'm trying desperately to get them away from. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So really consider, like, where are you in the emotional bank account with your kid? Because if you're in the red, you can read my book chapter and verse tonight, go home and try every single little exercise, and you could call me tomorrow and say, well, that didn't work. You're bad at this. But that's probably because your emotional bank account is deep in the red. But if it's in the black, then your kid knows they have an ally, and the word I like to use lately, an accomplice. Somebody who's going to work with me to get through the difficult time. Invaluable. Huge, huge, huge deal. They need adults in their lives that are on their side. They need to know I'm not in a silo having to navigate this whole world all by myself. And we might have felt that when we were kids. Kids today need to be explicitly told that and shown that. So lighting up shows them that without any question in their mind. They know, okay, they've got me. They've got my back. Okay, I'm gonna go a few more things, and then I want to hear your questions. I mentioned earlier that our kids are not moving; they're inert, and that is true. And I am embarrassed to say that if I were here a decade ago, the speech I would have given you is, our kids are way too active. These travel sports are crazy. We're driving our kids to one activity from one end to another. We're Uber drivers. We need more free play time for our kids. We're over-programming their lives. At the time, maybe that makes sense. Post-pandemic, I take it all back. I was wrong. I changed my mind. I want kids to be busy. Our kids are so inert, so not moving. And when I work with a kid who is engaged in something, who is here at the library working for the greater good, who is in the orchestra pit, who is on the stage, who is on the track, on the field, in the pool, on the gridiron, doing their thing, that kid I know has a couple hours a day where they are in some sanctuary where there are no phones, there are no textbooks, there's no drama, there's no, I got all this time to think about how much I hate myself or I hate my body. All this stuff is in the margins because I just have to learn these lines. I just have to get down to the wall in that swim lane as fast as I can. I was speaking earlier today and I mentioned that my son was a swimmer in high school and his coach is retiring. So we went to his last meet and there were, he's now a high school girls coach, very successful guy, 200 girls on the swim deck. And they are, there's not a phone in sight. And they're laughing and they're prepping, they're working their strokes on one end of the field. They're dancing to Cotton Eye Joe on another end of the place. The place is full of life. And I was thinking, this looks like it could have happened 50 years ago. This feels right. This feels healthy. Not that we should never have our kids engaged in technology or any of the stressors that they're involved in day to day. But this is a different kind of stressor. This engages the mind, body, and spirit in something completely different than they're normally drawn to. And this is good stuff for our kids. So I like it when kids are busy. If you give me an exhausted kid who is yawning on my couch at the end of the day, I will take that any day over a kid who comes in, drops down, and is exhausted because he or she is just depressed and cannot muster the energy to do the thing. And the shift from inertia to movement is a big, mighty, powerful one. It's going to take a lot of trial and error on your part if you have a child who is not moving, but do not relent on this because the best way to put me and my ilk out of business in your life is to get your kids moving. Right now, that is, to me, perhaps the biggest problem. A couple other quick things. Most of our kids have a thing or two that they believe about themselves, either in a moment or for a period of time, that is the worst thing. It's the most horrible thing for a therapist or a parent or a friend to hear. I'm fat, I'm stupid, I'm ugly, I screwed up really badly, I don't think I'm worthwhile, I don't think I'm heading anywhere. Thoughts like that, the darkest stuff, the heaviest stuff to carry. And our job is to just hold that thought. We can't fix that, and it might be fleeting, but if we let our kids know, hey, that really sucks. I'm so sorry that you are in that spot. Let me know if there's anything I can do. Kids can move on from that moment. Then they can breathe. Okay, I said the thing, mom or dad didn't blow up. I think I might be able to move on with my life. I think I can move forward. I don't feel perfect, but I feel good enough to move on. But if you do what you're inclined to do, this was my problem as a parent, and sometimes my problem as a therapist is the inclination to say, no, you're smart and you're funny and you're beautiful, and if they don't want to hang out with you, that's their problem, and so screw them all, and you're the best one. And what we're saying when we do that is, I can't handle this thing that you have. And there is no better recipe for hopelessness for a young person than to know, oh, I get it. I went to mom or dad, and they can't take the thing. So that child has a couple of choices. I stand here with this thing. It grows like a cancer. Or I take it to another 15-year-old, and then he's my de facto therapist, and he's going to help me fix it. And, you know, I went to grad school. I wrote a really bad dissertation, but I wrote the thing, and I've been practicing for 30 years. There are times where I still feel over my skis when I'm working with young people. I do not want a 15-year-old in this position as much as they're willing to be. It is not reasonable, it's not fair, and it's dangerous. So the better story, the better answer is that you're the one who hears the thing. I can go do something else. I've been doing this long enough. Good. 2 more quick points, and then I want to hear what you guys have to say, if we have time. I have no idea what time it is.
Yes, we do.
We do? Okay, good. There are a couple of current trends, you guys, that we can draft off of. And this is really good news. There are kids who have decided, I'm not going to be on the internet all day. So I don't know, for those of you who are younger, I don't know if you have friends yet who are walking around with flip phones. But I have 4 clients right now who have flip phones. And they'll tell me, you would not believe how badass it feels to walk through a high school hallway knowing like, hey, I'm not addicted to the thing you guys all need so badly. I might just make a phone call or send a text, but that's all I got here. I'll close this thing, put it in my pocket. You guys are all junkies. I'm fine. I'm good. So there's this power, right, in that. But there's also, a lot of these kids will describe to me, oh, I forgot what it was like to see people's faces. This one guy said to me recently, the surprises for me he said the 2 weeks after were hard because he said it was like having a phantom limb. Like he would like reach for it and it's not there. Like, where's my phone? Where's my iPhone? I gotta check. But he said after that, he found himself looking up and he said the biggest surprises are birds, sky, trees, and faces. He said, I didn't look people in the face. So I had this resting a-hole face all the time, like all the time. I didn't even know it. I didn't know that I was not looking at people. But now I look at people, I smile, I engage. I feel less lonely, and I don't feel the FOMO that I thought I was going to feel leaving this thing at home. Unbelievable. And that is a trend. There's more of that that's going to happen because I know how this stuff goes. It starts in little granules, and it grows and grows. The other cool things that are happening are kids are considerate about drinking. Whereas kids used to be like, hit a certain age, and they just start drinking because this is what everyone does. It's mortifying when you're not drinking. Kids are, I happen not to drink. There's alcoholism in my family, and so I never have. And kids will come in and ask me 1,000 questions like, okay, so what do you do at a party? If you're not drinking, what do you do? And I say, well, I might hold a red Solo cup if I don't want a single question. More often than not, people aren't judgmental. They're usually like, oh, that's pretty cool. Can you drive us home? You know, usually it's something like that, but it's never a negative thing, never, ever a negative thing. Kids are also considerate about smoking and vaping. Kids are talking about like, I don't think I want to lose the next day. And I used to be a really good athlete, and now I cannot play a game of basketball without losing my breath. And I'm young. What are my lungs going to be like 10 years from now? Kids are considerate about this. And what I love about it is it's not coming from a lecture from us. This is coming organically from them. There's some internal meter that's saying, this isn't healthy for you. This is not how you want to live your life. So make that change. Make some change in your life so that you feel better, so that you are healthier. And this, I'm telling you guys, this stuff is trending. So I encourage you to talk to the kids around you about this stuff. Ask them what they think. And they might say right away, well, that's stupid. Keep asking them. Make it a discussion. You know what I mean? Like make everything a discussion. Make very few things lectures. Seek help when you need help. So if you see dramatic changes in your kids' affect or behavior or dress, or if they're alone all the time, or if they tell you, I'm not well, I think I need somebody's help, believe them. You know, I've worked with a lot of parents who are like, I think she's fine. I'm going to let this go. Let's see if it gets worse. No, if your kid is coming to you and telling you, I'm having a really hard time, I would trust that. Erring on the conservative there's no downside. And the last piece of advice I have for you is going to sound weird. Hug your kids. I cannot tell you how many kids I have worked with who have said, I don't remember the last time I felt the physical touch of another person or I touched a person. And they mean it quite seriously, including their family. So we think that intimacy, I think a lot of times begins in high school in some way, but really it begins at home, right? That hug means a lot, and it says a lot. I was telling somebody earlier that my father was the worst possible parent for a young kid. He was unpredictable, he was unavailable, he was short-tempered, he wasn't around a whole lot. But every night before I went to bed, he would deliberately come up to me, look me in the eye, kiss me on the forehead. And I remember thinking, okay, I'm a little bit afraid of this guy, but I think if the chips were down, I think he's on my side. I think I've got him. Like, I think he's my guy, you know? Like, so if you hug your kids, first of all, that's an alliance without words, right? But it's also that intimacy that our kids are missing so desperately in their lives. Like, you know, we know that newborns need to be touched and held. This is true, I think, of all of us throughout our lives. We do not thrive without some human touch, you know? So hug your kids. Surprise them tonight and hug them. I will conclude with this. Since the pandemic, what I hear from parents in particular is we've blown this whole thing. This house is a disaster. These kids are a mess. They're just watching TV. No homework's getting done. I was going to do Pilates and look amazing, and I don't look amazing yet. And people are judging themselves. I've done this wrong. And if you look at my Instagram feed, all these families seem to be amazing. Everyone's like incredible. No negative self-talk in the Glenn Bard Parent Series. No, you've just parented through the hardest thing that no other generation that we can think of has parented through. And you're here tonight at this thing, which tells me you're attentive to it. You're paying attention to how you're parenting. And that is big. So extend some grace to yourself. You're doing great. There's always room for improvement, but you're doing great at the core. And if you're going to extend grace like that to yourself, you need to extend it to your kids too, right? They're also, if they're making it to school most days, if they're trying in their own way to get through their very complicated, difficult lives, then they get the grace as well. So be kind and gentle with yourselves, be kind and gentle with your people, and I appreciate your attention here tonight. Thank you for hanging in here.
We've got some kids here that will probably be running out the door in a minute to get their homework.
Yeah,
But
I bet you guys have homework, my God.
2 minutes, can you just direct some comments to the kids?
Yeah. So you guys are, I'm going to wait until I want the attention of the kids. The class is getting disrupted. No, please. I'm completely kidding. You guys who are here are so important to each other and to your peers. I know that I am looking at leaders here. I know I am preaching to the choir. I know there's a lot of things I have said here tonight that you guys already know. So when you go to school tomorrow, if you probably can all think of the kid. Like I mentioned, like, I know the kid who's going to pull that trigger. I know the kid who's sad. I know the kid who's alone a lot of the time. Be the person who reaches out to that kid. Be the person who makes that invite. I see the kindness of young faces here, and your world is harsh. And I don't even know if you guys recognize how harsh your world is relative to the way ours was when we were your age, but your kindness, your gentleness, and your connection with your peers, that's going to make a bigger impact than any of the rest of us are going to possibly make. So go out of your way to people you don't know and extend a moment of kindness. And I can tell every young face I'm looking at here is really, really capable of that. So even if it's a little outside your comfort zone, do that. You won't regret it, right? You know, like, go to the person who is not gone to very often and just ask them, check in with them. Hey, how's it going? How you doing? And move on with your day. That lighting up, you're the ones now saving the lives, and seriously. And so if you would do that, you are doing this community and this world an enormous service. And I really am grateful to see young people here tonight. It is amazing. Yes, really cool. Here's to you guys.